Being 6 o'clock, I'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have the reading of the notice, please.
The educational and adjourned organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Thursday, September 19th at 6 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. I would like to request everyone silence their cell phones and any other electronic devices as to not be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your indulgence. We'll move on to roll call and ask everyone please sign in. Supervisor Reynolds, could you sign in, please? All right, and thank you. I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have here with us this evening, and I would also like to welcome all of those that are joining by YouTube and watching, and thanking you for your interest in county government. And we'll move on to item B, educational presentation and/or reports, standing committee chairs or designees. Any reports by standing committee chairpersons or designees? Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just go over the budget timelines. You've all been at the committee level talking about the 2025 budget, and the administrator will be unveiling it in the committees in early October. The Finance Committee will have a presentation on October 9th, and then we will be voting on approving it for publication on October 14th. We ask if you have some amendments that you get those in as soon as possible so we can consider those. Once it's published, it goes to the Herald, and that's the budget by which we have the public hearing on. It doesn't mean we can't amend the budget, but rather it's the one that goes up for publication. And then we will have a hearing on November 7th, and then the Finance Committee will meet again on November 11th and present it to the County Board on November 12th. The committees throughout that process will have the ability to provide input on those areas within your jurisdiction. And then ultimately, the County Board will adopt both the capital improvement plan and the budget on the 12th of November.
Okay, any other chairpersons or designees? All right, we will move on then to consent agenda items C8 through C10. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Drabek and seconded by Supervisor Crivelli. Any discussion on the agenda items C8 through items C10? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item D from the Environmental Resources Committee. Item 11D11, Town of Frankfurt rezone. Tim Vreeland on behalf of Russell Giese. Ordinance 29-24. What is your pleasure? Motion by motion by Ritter and second by Seefeld. Any discussion on the agenda item, the Town of Frankfurt rezone? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed, and the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item D12, the Town of Hall rezone. Kurt and Lori from Linda Bream, ordinance 30-24. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Marash and second by Supervisor Curvelli. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. We'll move on to item D14, Town of Reed rezone. Cole Yock and Todd Eckers, ordinance 32-24. What is your pleasure? Motion by Arstead and seconded by Ritter. Any discussion on the agenda item? Town of Reed rezone. Oops, I apologize. So I will restate that this is the Town of Hall rezone. Leonard Martin, item D13, ordinance 31-24. And I just verify the motion is from Supervisor Arstead. Are you still good with that motion?
Yes.
And the second, Supervisor Ritter, are you good with that second on that ordinance 31-24?
Yes.
You. Any discussion on that rezone? Again, this is the Town of Hall rezone. Leonard Martin. All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. I just announced to the board that we have one board member that is attending remotely, and I believe that she's watching the meeting via YouTube, which has a delay in it, and she's voting as soon as she understands that the vote is up. Supervisor Hoppe, could you vote, please? We're going to mark Supervisor Hoppe as abstaining and move forward. Again, Supervisor Hoppe had requested, and I granted her attending virtually. Move on then to item D14. Now the Town of Reed rezone Cole Yock and Todd Eckers, ordinance 32-24. Motion by Drabeck and seconded by Seefeld. Any discussion on that rezone? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to Town of D15, Town of Spencer rezone. Tim Vreeland on behalf of Kevin and Peggy Miller, ordinance 33-24. What is your pleasure? Motion by Marash and seconded by Conway. Any discussion on that rezone from the Town of Spencer? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Supervisor Langenhan, could you vote? I thank you. And we'll proceed, and the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item D16, Town of Wien rezone, Michael and Whitney Mishka, item ordinance 34-24. Motion by Arstead, seconded by Rosenberg. Any discussion on the Town of Wien rezone for Michael and Whitney Mishka? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item D17, amending the ordinance to opt in to the Wisconsin Public Records Board Retention Schedule, ordinance 35-24. Motion by Supervisor Langenhan and seconded by Supervisor Crivelli. I would give the opportunity to the Deputy Administrator to give a brief overview for Corporation Counsel.
Hey, exciting day for me. The proposed change in the ordinance before you does a few things. Looking at our existing retention schedule, it was adopted in 1990, and when it was adopted, that adoption occurred before the current iteration of the state's Public Records Board. And current state law does indicate that a municipality should elect to opt in or opt out to the general records retention schedules set forth by the Public Records Board. And Marathon County hasn't done either of those things, opted in or opted out. In looking at the choices, opting in sets us up to be in compliance with the state records retention guidelines. The Public Records Board publishes these general schedules. We would be adopting their schedule, which sets forth how long the county should retain certain records. We have to retain them pursuant to state law anyways, but this gives staff clear guidance as to each type of record that the county deals with. It also makes it clear which records are submitted to the Wisconsin Historical Society at the time the record is to be destroyed or otherwise not retained. So it gives staff really clear guidance on how to respond to records retention, especially in this digital age where we have a lot of different records. The idea behind the ordinance change as well is to make it clear that we're opting into the general records schedule that the Public Records Board has put together. The benefit of that, beyond being compliant with state law, is that there are certain records that the Public Records Board can create a retention period that is shorter than what normally state law says is 7 years. There are some records, only the Public Records Board has the power to shorten that term, and the only way we can get the benefit of that shortened term is to opt into their schedule. If they have updates to their records retention schedule during the time period that it's in effect, we would, through this ordinance, get the benefit of those updates as well. from my perspective, providing legal advice to the county, its staff, committees, and the board, I think this would really give staff a lot of good guidance, protect the county in the case of some mistake as far as records being not retained, because it really gives that clear guidance. And it makes us compliant with state law, which is also always very good. So if you're looking for a legal recommendation, I would strongly advise that you pass this amendment.
Okay, any questions? Supervisor Longenhahn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that we are the custodians of the records that we keep for our offices. Does this ordinance impact those records retention times in any way?
I don't believe it changes any of the records that you would normally be responsible for, but it could impact them if you retained a record that is subject to that records retention schedule. It doesn't change much, but it could impact. I'm not even thinking of one that you would regularly deal with that it would impact, but it could.
Okay,
How is
thank
that
you.
for a lawyer answer?
That's fine. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Moving on from the Extension Education and Economic Development Committee and Human Resources and Finance and Property Committee. Item E18, amend the budget to transfer $200,000 of American Rescue Act funds to address childcare shortage through a service contract. Resolution 38-24. This is a budget amendment, does require a 2/3 majority vote. Motion by Supervisor Zhang and seconded by Supervisor Rosenberg. Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a little background on this resolution. We had early last spring formed an unofficial child care work group with different members of a couple of us from the county board as well as through the community, and we were brainstorming different ways to tackle the child care crisis in Marathon County. And as we all know, this is not unique to our county, it's all across the board. So we identified that the best way to help at this point was we need workers. Getting new childcare providers is not going to help because we don't have enough people to work there. So we came up with this cohort scholarship program. So this would use ARPA dollars, and we would be encumbering all of those before the end of this year because they need to be encumbered by the end of 2024 and used by the end of 2026. So there's been a lot of different ideas on how we could work with the community for public-private partnerships going forward after this 2-year program. We've met with the Community Foundation, and we will continue as a work group to work on that because this is good for 2 years. But first we have to see if it will even work at all. And the idea would be that we could train 30 people, which could potentially open up 240 childcare slots. So for the Economic Development Committee, the EED committee, we did outline in the beginning of our term that childcare was a priority. It is something we have to address. It affects our workforce development. It affects the people that are living here trying to live, work, and play. If they're not able to create good jobs or take good jobs, they're not going to move here. So I'm in a neighborhood group, and our real estate agent has even said that people have decided not to move here because there's childcare wait lists. So I realize that there's many people that don't believe that county government has a role in childcare. I tend to agree with that, But for this, we have to start somewhere. We can't just let this go. And this is an opportunity where we can work with child caring. They would do the training and also have different stipends based on how long the person would work there after they get their training done. Their training would happen while they're already employed. So it wouldn't be that first you get trained and then you go work. You'd be doing that as you go. So it's not an all or nothing. They need to work for 2 years in order to not have to pay the money back. So I really do hope that you'll support this. It does address many of our strategies and our different objectives. I had them all written out, but I don't think I need to tell you all of those because you can read them yourself. So if you have any questions, Kelly is here, and Supervisor Lemmer and Supervisor Robinson are also on the group, and I'm sure that they would be willing to give their input as well. Thank you.
Okay, we got Supervisor Robinson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a critical issue. It's been identified by the Chamber, and Dave Ekman has provided you with a letter of support for this. They're having difficulty, bringing women back into the workforce that left with the pandemic. There was a statistic of 35% of the women that left didn't come back, and one of the reasons was childcare. It wasn't either affordable or accessible, and this is an effort to try to address part of that problem, the issue of accessibility, and deal with some of the childcare deserts. Earlier this week, Wood County adopted a resolution committing $500,000 of ARPA funds to their health department, who in turn will contract for child care services. So it's our neighboring counties are dealing with it. This isn't a subsidy on an ongoing basis. It's an effort to try to bring more providers into the system to expand the slots. The Chamber will be creating a task force that will be dealing with task force and looking at what their role will be in the future. More and more businesses, again, are identifying this as a critical need in recruiting and retaining employees, and it's a step in the right direction, not the entire journey in that direction. We need to do a lot as a community, and we need to follow the leads of other counties that have engaged in provision of this service.
Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think anyone can disagree that the need is there. However, I would like to propose an amendment to this resolution. The employers of Marathon County stand to benefit the most from this resolution and this program. Heartened to see that the Chamber stated the business community is ready and willing to roll up the sleeves in a collaborative effort. With that, I would like to propose that this be a matching grant program, that dollar for dollar, we match what the Chamber raises to provide the training for this workers. Again, dollar for dollar. Secondly, to do that, we probably can't use ARPA money because that could possibly take time, and therefore I recommend that we use the funding come from the $800,000 contingency fund at the administrator's level, which to date we have not used a dollar of. And thirdly, that the contract be written as a pay as people are signed up. So right now, rather than just hand over $200,000 or $100,000, that as people are signed up for the program, that's when we hand the money over. That's how I believe all of us would do. If you have a construction project, you don't pay for it all up front and hope for a great result. You pay as the work is done. So with those three amendments, I would ask for if anyone would provide a second.
Okay, is there a second? Just a second. We don't have, the clerk does not have the motion, the amendment actually typed into the system yet. All right, we have a motion and a second to provide an amendment, and the amendment would do is, I understand the motion, maker of the motion, three things. One, require a match by the chamber. Second, would require that we not provide the funding until the individuals are identified by contract. And then what was the third one? And using contingency instead of the ARPA funding. Open up for discussion. Supervisor Boots.
I would like to hear from Supervisor Marash, if I could, about what her thoughts are on this, since this was through her committee.
The thought is we wanted to use the ARPA because I believe, and I believe other people agree, that this is what ARPA was for, to rebuild our community after the devastating effects of COVID. So that's why I thought this was very appropriate. I do agree with Supervisor Marshall that it would be great to be able to have a match, but we don't have that kind of time if we want to use this ARPA. So that's why we went down this road instead.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
You know, I would just echo what Supervisor Marash said relative to the timing. This is a critical issue. And, you know, we talked about access to providers and affordability. This resolution deals with the issue of access. It doesn't deal with the issue of affordability. Many employers are currently contributing toward child care expenses for their employees, and I don't know how we would capture that. Is it an employer contribution for the total sum of child care services, or for this training program only? And it's hard to know. And employers are willing to do that if there's a little bit more certainty. In terms of bringing it out of the contingency fund versus use of ARPA dollars, if you bring it out of the contingency fund, that affects our capital improvement plan in 2 years, because we use our balance at the end of the audit next year to fund the capital improvement plan for the year after that. We have money available through ARPA. The business community is committed to looking at this and working with it, but I think it is critical that we get this program off the ground to increase the supply, to deal with a critical need in this community and eliminate some of those child care deserts.
Supervisor Sandelsky. I had to re-log in, so it recirculated the order. Supervisor Kroll, please. Okay, Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to echo what my colleagues have said. This is an important issue to take care of today. Just 3 days ago, the governor put out a press release explaining that due to lack of staff, our child care facilities are unable to service 33,000 kids in Wisconsin. I would respectfully ask if Kelly could talk about some numbers in Marathon County specifically, if that's appropriate, but ARPA money can be used today. If we wait for a match, we may need to wait longer to get this program up and running. And I think we've got several county-wide facilities that are looking forward and can hire people now. So our waiting list could go down now.
Okay, Supervisor Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple questions. How will has there been discussion as to how the scholarship funds will be distributed among providers? And is it open to any child care within Marathon County?
Without objection, I would invite Kelly and the administrator to address it, whichever wishes to address it first. Is there any objection to having Kelly Borkert address the board? Okay, Kelly, please.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, supervisors. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's how would the scholarships be distributed? And we would have an application process, and any regulated childcare program in Marathon County would be eligible for that program. There's currently, 58 regulated programs in the Marathon County area. So it would be group centers as well as family child care providers who would need the training would be eligible as well.
Okay, Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do find that as I drive around the community, we have soccer fields paid for by businesses or sponsored by businesses. We have athletic fields. We have several things that are a priority. And if childcare is a priority for the chamber, I don't find $100,000 as a heavy lift for this community for a dollar for dollar match. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Sandelsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first off, the government is not the place to take care of every one of your needs. Government is the place to take care of citizens' essentials that they cannot provide for themselves. Examples like infrastructure, build and maintain roads, sheriff's department to keep law and order, EMS service. Child care funding should not be the responsibility of the taxpayers. As with many services in the county, this is ARPA money now. Next year, it could possibly be added to the tax levy. That's the way that's the way a lot of programs work within the county for the new members. Many of the issues that surround the child care and make it very expensive are the egregious regulations and red tape that must one go through that are not related. Like we talked about last year with the amount of children that you can care for is only up to 3 unless you have a special licensing. And the taxpayers are already paying for the K through 12, whether they have children in the public schools or not, and whether or not they believe in what is being taught. So that being said, I think the parents are the best for the child care. And I believe if businesses want to, I would be in favor of businesses taking on child care for their workers. But I don't think this should be a government issue and taxpayer funded, be a burden for the taxpayers. Thank you.
Supervisor Jacobson, please.
I just had one other question perhaps Kelly can answer. It will, if approved, I presume that the chamber or in partnership with others will be publicizing the program and application process to all the providers within Marathon County. And I assume it doesn't matter whether they're a chamber member of the Wausau Chamber. And I guess where I'm going with this, having one daughter in a small child care already, and I'll just skip down to announcements under a request. Found out yesterday I'm going to have 2. So, and as soon as we found out, we put her on the wait list, and August of 2025 is as soon as we can get in. So I understand the crisis, and I just want to make sure that those smaller providers are going to be made aware of the process, given a fair shot to apply, because I spent a significant amount of time last year at child care roundtables with others and listening to them and stakeholders in the community. And the concern of some of those smaller providers is in competition with the larger providers of losing existing employees to some of those larger providers. So I guess the point of my question is I just want to make sure they have a fair shot at applying, that they're going to be made aware of the program, and there's going to be some equal distribution. It's not just Wausau, large providers, because we do, the smaller rural communities are the ones that suffer even more, I believe.
Go ahead, Kelly, please.
Thank you, Supervisor. Yes, in fact, when we surveyed the child care centers, they were in all parts of Marathon County. All the rural areas that actually have group centers were surveyed, and 75% indicated they would participate in the program. They have a great interest in finding and securing staff, and as well as the family child care providers who would be certified or licensed would be the ones that we would be targeting. Or if folks were unregulated, wanting to work on certification or licensing, this funding could be used for them to take the training for free that they would need in order to become a regulated provider. So that's the critical piece, right? It's people don't earn a lot in this field, and so when you can incentivize them with some free training and commitment, that would go a huge step in the right direction. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Are we supposed to be talking about the amendment rather than the motion itself? Because I feel like we're staring off from the amended discussion.
Point well taken. We should be discussing the amendments, and the amendment, again, is requiring a match by the chamber, redirecting the funding from contingency and not releasing the funds until provided for the service. So again, that's the amendment is what we are discussing right now. Supervisor Crivelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And based on the ARPA dollar balance that we have and the timeline to use ARPA dollars, can I get some clarification on what that balance is and the timeline to use that so we can make an informed decision on Supervisor Marshall's amendment versus Supervisor Marash's proposal?
Administrator Leonard, please.
Sure, thank you. I can give you a general overview of kind of where we are with ARPA, but I think to your larger question, which I think is one of, hey, are we going to be able to spend it? I'll also highlight something that was talked about at HR Finance at their last meeting and relative to a strategy to do that. So at this point, you have approximately $1.28 million that you have never allocated. However, you have a number of projects that have been started with ARPA that are not completed, and you have some projects that will never be completed, primarily a broadband allocation. So we discussed at HR Finance a strategy to essentially clean up the ARPA allocations. Hopefully we'll have that done at your next meeting to bring to the full board in October. The idea being for all the projects that we know are not going to either fully expend their ARPA dollars within the requisite timelines, or where there's even a potential risk that they would come in under budget, we're going to essentially reallocate those ARPA dollars to projects that we know have the requisite bills to do that, to essentially alleviate the concern, which I think you're trying to get at, that is, how much do we need to spend and how fast do we need to spend it? This project, if it's funded by the board today, would essentially just change the way that we how we would accomplish that in our cleanup resolution. But our goal from the staff perspective is to make sure that the taxpayers of Marathon County, pursuant to the direction from HR Finance and Property, that we keep as much of those federal dollars. We don't want to have to give any of them back because they came from every county across the state, including the taxpayers here. So I think that if the underlying point of your question is there a fear that we're not going to allocate those dollars? I think we have a different strategy to essentially clear that up. But this $200,000, excuse me, if it were allocated, it would just change. We wouldn't have to do that with that project. A long, convoluted answer. I hope that makes sense.
No, that helps. Thank you.
Supervisor Jacobson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to clarify my comments were more a point of information that I need to decide how to vote on the amendment in response to the point of order that was raised. Thank you.
Supervisor Hart, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question on this. Do we have a commitment from the chamber that they will give $100,000 to match this? Because my concern right now is that unless they have a check ready to go, this is going to delay this entire project a lot longer than what was originally intended. And with spending with ARPA, I mean, we only have 4 months to commit that. So for me, I see we either are ready to go with this right now, or we go into discussion with the chamber to see if we even have the ability, or they have the ability to match this, and then go from there. So I have a lot of concerns about this amendment just from that, and I guess I'll ask if that discussion has been had or not yet. Thank you.
Supervisor Marash, please.
We have not had discussions with the chamber on this amendment or being able to have it, that they would have a check in hand. We'd be starting from scratch, basically.
Further discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Wilhelm, please.
A question I had, were businesses brought in with the discussions, like, did they seem like they were willing to contribute, or was it just understanding if, with the amendment, to see if there is some, if they do want to contribute, or if it's just they're trying to come up with ideas?
So when we, with our child care work group, and please Supervisor Robinson and Lemmer jump in if you have anything to add, but we didn't reach out to businesses because we wanted to encumber the ARPA dollars, so we didn't go down that road at all yet. However, we did meet with the Community Foundation with the hopes that this would pass to figure out a way forward if it was successful, because we don't even know if we will have people that will want to take the training yet. We don't know. So we're trying to not put the cart before the horse. And we also, just to say, we reached out to Janice Watson, who is with ECDC, working with the refugee population, to see if that might be a population that would be interested in participating in this, and they were very excited about it. As far as other businesses, Kelly has spoken with several different child care programs, and she could expound on this more than I can, but they were very excited about it too. So I don't know if you want to address that.
Please go ahead, Kelly.
So in considering our childcare businesses, right, I explained that when we surveyed them, we worked, let me step back and just say primarily when we developed this program and considered how this would operate and work with our childcare providers, I talked and consulted with WASA Childcare as well as the YMCA, because they have almost half of the regulated group childcare slots in this county. Then I also surveyed all of the other group childcare centers in the county, who are all childcare businesses, and 75% of them committed to this program.
Okay, Supervisor Robinson, please.
So I had an opportunity to talk to Dave Ekman yesterday about the funding issue, and the chamber just is not in a position right now to commit to that funding. And I think what we're again trying to do is get an immediate jump start on a problem. The discussions at the work group level have been with, with McDevco, with the chamber, with the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership, to try to find solutions to a very real problem that is an immediate problem. We've had the discussions of using the Community Foundation as a way of providing services into the future, but that's in the future. I think we're trying to, again, deal with a problem that is with us today. Nobody has said no, but we haven't defined what the process is, and a number of those businesses are currently funding their buying slots at child care providers. So there is a commitment in the part of the business community that isn't tracked and isn't before us tonight. But the chamber, based on the discussion with Dave Ekman yesterday, isn't in a position right now to commit. He would have to go to his board and the members. And again, we're staring at a deadline relative to ARPA.
Supervisor Marshall, please.
I just wanted to highlight that there's a reason that the child care centers are going to be excited about this program. Not only do we provide 100% of the training, we pay people for their training, and there's $2,500 on top of the training that is given to the child care center and on top of the training for those 30 individuals to use for other reasons. So of course, they're going to be excited. Secondly, I believe the chamber was part of the work group that's been meeting since April. So to say that they haven't been given enough time, I find as, again, they've been meeting since April. Thank you.
Supervisor Seibert, please.
Thank you, Chairman Gibbs. The question I have is that all the surrounding areas, my area is a border. Everybody, a lot of people here have border, where we border up against Wood County, Lincoln County. And I would, if I had to guess, I would say 60% of my constituents go to Marshfield Daycare, Marshfield Clinic, Tiny Tots. How will they benefit from this if the place is not in Marathon County, but all its customers are related to Marathon County, or a high percentage of them? I mean, we're surrounded by different counties on all sides. So is it just going to be central Marathon County, or is it going to extend for these outside establishments?
Kelly?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Because this is Marathon County funding, the child care centers themselves would need to be located within Marathon County. But if you had a person who was living in Merrill, living in Marshfield, working at a group center in Marathon County, they would be eligible. At least preliminarily, that's what we're thinking, is that people would have to be working in a center that's located in Marathon County, because it's Marathon County funding. And as an agency that's regional and have, we serve multiple counties, that's typically how we do things when we have funding and grant-related funding. It stays within the county where it originated or where the funder tells us it needs to stay. Does that help?
Oh, but thank you.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I got a question for Supervisor Marshall in relation to, I kind of like her idea, but is there going to be like a future as like the businesses would take over the county portion, not be like, because I can see this like going on and on for years and years. Is there like going to be a plan to have the businesses kind of take over the, because I feel like the businesses are the ones that want the workers, so if they would contribute to the, not being all the government and taxpayer funded.
Yes, that would be the case.
Thank you.
Supervisor Boots.
Call the question.
Question's called. Is there any objection to question being called? Is there a second to the question being called? Just a second. The clerk needs to enter the motion to move the previous question. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Ritter. Seeing that there's no objection to the motion to the question being called, the question has been called, the debate has been terminated, and there was no one else in the queue, so we're now at a point of voting on the amendment, and I'll make clear what the amendment is. The amendment requires a match from the chamber. It moves the funding source from ARPA to contingency, and requires a not to release the funding until identified each participant by contract. Is everybody clear on what the amendment is that you're voting on? All right, we will proceed to vote. No, our rules were changed. Debate is not, without objection, debate is ended per our rules. And so we're not voting on ending debate. We're voting on the actual amendment itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we'll proceed. And the motion is defeated. We are back to the original motion as presented on the resolution. Any further discussion? Supervisor Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate the importance of this because while I was in committee today, I got a Snapchat from my sister-in-law, and she sent a picture of my nephew asleep in the back seat of her car, strapped in his car seat, because he went to work with mom today cleaning houses. And that is the current state of childcare in Marathon County, is that my sister-in-law and my brother both have to take their kids to work, and their only permanent childcare is if school's in session. So that is currently what's happening in Marathon County right now today. So I just wanted to say that to kind of share how important this is, that we get this passed. Thank you.
Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to emphasize that this is a workforce development initiative. It's not a funding source for parents. I didn't want to have to go through some of the objectives that are relevant, but I will now. Objective 3.3 in our strategic plan is to ensure that every person make it to adulthood with health, stability, and growth opportunity. The strategies related are strategy C, develop a framework for building resilient children and providing parent resources, and F, develop policies that support affordable, high-quality childcare. Then we have objective 10.6, ensure the future availability of a skilled and flexible workforce prepared to meet the needs of both existing and emerging technologies. Strategy C with that is develop policies that support affordable, high-quality childcare to enhance workforce availability. Objective 10.8, encourage development and redevelopment of key employment centers in areas that possess strong market potential, provide good transportation access for workers, and promote the efficient movement of goods. Outcome measure 2 for that objective is by December 31st, 2024, the number of private sector full-time and part-time employee positions in Marathon County will increase or be maintained. So this would be a goal to increase the number of part-time or full-time positions in childcare. So this isn't about funding people's childcare. This is about being able to provide an opportunity to increase our workforce. Thank you.
Supervisor Zhang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have is for Kelly. And Kelly, you know, I work in nonprofit too. So both of us, many of these, I look at this as like a grant here. What would success look like? If you can share that with us with this contribution, what would success look like?
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. Success, again, we're targeting about 30 individuals over the next 2 years to come into the childcare field, which is very significant. What we would see is currently there are many centers that have closed classrooms because they can't find teachers to work there. So it would open classrooms that have been closed. Sometimes as many as 3 to 4 classrooms in a center have been closed because staff call in sick or they're shorthanded or they've never been able to hire for some of those classrooms. So we would see more childcare slots available for working families. We would see people that would stay in their positions. I think it is a great idea to have a 2-year commitment to individuals taking advantage of this program. So we'll train them, but then we'll ask that they stay in their positions or another childcare program within Marathon County for that 2-year term or pay back the funds. So I think we'd see stability for children. I think we'd see commitment among teachers to stay at childcare programs and more working families as a result of those additional slots.
Thank you.
Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Kelly was alluding to. So if you looked at the HR Finance and Property and the Extension Education Economic Development Committee packets, I put together a draft service contract. This was, and it is draft. I already know I'm going to make one change based on just some of the discussion, but kind of to try to add some bones to, what this might look like and how it would be implemented. So to your specific question, Supervisor, about what would success look like, I tried to capture a requirement relative to child caring to report on how the program is going during the implementation. So every 6 months, they need to provide an update relative to the number of individuals enrolled that are completing the training. They need to provide updates relative to the number of children and families receiving care from individuals that have completed the program, the status of those employer stipends and job placements, as well as any issues or challenges encountered during implementation. And then at the end of the 2-year service contract term, there's a requirement that Child Caring provide a comprehensive report detailing a couple of things. First, as Kelly alluded to, the 2-year retention rates. They need to report on the number of program graduates who have remained employed in the child care sector after both 1 and 2 years to assess whether the program is having that long-lasting impact. And they need to include in that portion of the report reasons why individuals had left the profession within 2 years to evaluate whether there are opportunities to make adjustments to improve retention. There's an economic impact report requirement to quantify the number of new child care slots created by employers. Again, these are child care employers, whether that's a family care provider or a center, who hire program graduates to determine if the program is effectively increasing child care capacity as it was intended. There's a requirement pursuant to the program that the Child Caring report on employer feedback, again, from the child care employers, that feedback relative to stipend utilization and job placement. So they need to collect data on how employers are using those stipends that were referred to and whether the job placements are sustained. And then similarly, there is an employer satisfaction report requirement. So again, these would be the child care employers, and then a participant satisfaction report. So individuals that have gone through the training, the education portion, they actually have to report on their satisfaction of whether they believe they perceived quality of the training, the adequacy of the support, and how well prepared they felt for their roles. So I tried to in this draft service contract, somewhat similar to what you've seen in the contracts that I put in place based on board direction for the other nonprofits that you fund. Tried to adopt that same approach. Here are the program requirements, how you're going to lay it out, and here are the things we're going to ask for in terms of reports to essentially try to get a handle on whether or not it was successful.
Supervisor Poole, please.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I was going to ask who's responsible for the oversight of this and if there is a plan in place to track the program's progress and funding, but I think Administrator Leonard just thoroughly explained that. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Lemmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see childcare as infrastructure, and I just looked up the definition of infrastructure. This is the Oxford Language Dictionary, and it says the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities needed for the operation of a society or enterprise. People can't go to work if they have children and no place to go with those children if they're not of school age. The educator in me says the most important time in a child's life is from conception to about 5 years old. And we are hopefully going to train 30 people to help them understand what high quality childcare really is. It's not babysitting. This is developmentally appropriate curriculum. It's safety, it's nurturing, it's helping them develop relationships so they are productive citizens. And we know that this pays dividends later. So I just would encourage you to support this. I think it's very good, hopefully. We know childcare accounts worked during COVID. I'm hoping the state or feds get their act together and see this as infrastructure and treat it like education as it is. But in the meantime, I think we need to do this, and I think we need to do it now.
Supervisor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I agreed with Supervisor Marshall's motion and idea. If we as a future board decide to continue with this program, I do have concerns with this resolution, but I do feel it's applicable, appropriate application of ARPA, and would hopefully give immediate relief to the backlog of parents seeking care for their children. Speaking two people choosing not to relocate here. Childcare isn't the only reason, but it sounds like one of them. So I'll be voting in favor of this resolution.
Supervisor DeBrew, please.
I guess I'm just wondering, unless I missed it, is there something in place or going to be put in place to take over the funding of this after the 2-year period? I think most of these people's concerns is that don't become a burden to the taxpayer or just moved on to that, because it's something we obviously need. But are they going to work on something that we get either commitment from the chamber or someone to take it over after 2 years?
Supervisor Marash?
Yes, I mentioned that a couple times, that we were working with the Community Foundation, and we will reach out to the chamber and other community stakeholders to, if this is successful, to be able to fund it that way because the county is out.
Supervisor Seibert, please.
Thank you. My question is this going to increase salaries? The daycare, I've had a lot of employees that worked in my business also work the daycare. And when McDonald's are paying more than what they get paid in daycare without any kind of benefits, before the meeting, we had talked about grandkids, how we get tired out just watching grandkids. And that's not watching them for 8 hours a day like these childcare at $10, $12 an hour. I just think that's what's got to change, is the salary and the benefits for these people. Thank you.
Supervisor Zhang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another question. Earlier in the beginning of the meeting, Supervisor Robinson mentioned that Wood County committed $500,000. I'm kind of curious as to how we ended up with the $200,000 ask rather than, I don't know, $500,000. I'm not asking, making a motion. I'm just asking for clarification.
I guess it was just trying to be reasonable with an amount that could make a difference. We discussed it at our Child Could Work group, and I mentioned what good could we do with $200,000. So this is where that's how we did the math. $200,000, 30 people trained, 240 slots. Thought it was a good place to start.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Administrator Leonard, please.
So I don't want to skip over Supervisor Seibert's question about and comment relative to wages. So the way that the draft service agreement was prepared, it was based on the information that Child Caring put together, working with the Extension Education Economic Development Committee that was reviewed. And the draft language that I incorporated provides, when you look at those employer stipends that are a part of this program, they are afforded, at least as it was initially contemplated, some flexibility. So the child care employer, whether that's a center or an individual in-home family provider, has flexibility to use those stipends as they see most beneficial. That said, that's why I included that report element, that how are you using the stipends is one of the things that they need to report on, because I think, the county had participated in the Dream Up program. We were one of the grant recipients, and you're absolutely right. One of the foundational issues, the challenges, is that the math, quite honestly, just doesn't work. What a child care employer is able to provide via a salary to their employees, they can't charge enough that families can pay to pay their people enough to have a wage that, to your point, competes well with other industries. So again, long way to say we'll see how they use it, but I think certainly from the presentations I've watched, and I let Kelly answer, I think the expectation is that a large portion of that would go directly to, like you said, salaries, but the program as it was envisioned didn't require all $5,000 of the stipend to go to the employee. It could be split to do some other things. I don't know, Kelly, if I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to answer that.
Yes. Thank you. What we're doing is we're setting up the $5,000 stipend would go to the employer of that participant, and we've structured like a tiered system where after 6 months they would receive a certain amount of a stipend, after 12 months another amount, 18 months, and then 24 months, in hopes that, and it would, we haven't talked through this completely, but I would hope that that would be a requirement for this stipend dollars, is that the majority of it would go back into paying that particular individual. But some of it could also be used for other onboarding costs, like criminal background checks, TB tests, physical exam. Those are all employment costs to a center to employ a new teacher. So there's an additional amount that is required when you have a new staff person in childcare as well. Does that help?
Any other discussion? All right, everybody clear? We're moving on to now a vote on amending the budget to transfer $200,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds to address child care shortage throughout the service contract. Resolution 38-24. Is everybody clear? We'll move to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to Health and Human Services Committee, a consideration of a charter for the creation of a joint City of Wausau and Marathon County Homelessness Task Force, Resolution 39-24. Motion by Supervisor Zhang and seconded by Supervisor Carvelli. Any discussion? Any discussion? Supervisor Sandalski, please.
So my question is, I see the homeless issue is mainly in the Wausau area. I mean, maybe there's more, but what I'm seeing is what percentage is, why does the county have to be involved in this?
Administrator Leonard, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify what the involvement for the task force is, this came from discussions at Health and Human Services and other committees. I know Extension, Education, Economic Development has talked about the challenges that do impact the county, most notably probably the library in terms of a facility where it's been talked about. But the point of the task force is not to commit the county to anything, but rather the point of the task force is to meet with the city to essentially develop a strategy that lays out what is the role of government, both the City of Wausau and Marathon County, but also clarify what are the expectations of surrounding municipalities. So it's not tying the county to saying, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but it is, to get to your point, better understand the demographics of the population. That's one of the first information gathering objectives, is to try to figure out who exactly we're talking about. And then move along to when you get to the section that talks about policy recommendation goals. The idea is that the task force provide some deliverables within timelines to report essentially on a couple of things. One, a recommendation whether the city and county should partner on acquiring housing to serve as transitional housing. More in the intermediate side, a recommendation to both the city and county based on the demographic data gathered, whether that necessitates the development of a formal mechanism to engage surrounding municipalities. So the idea there is, you may have heard, there's certainly been discussions about who are the individuals that we're talking about that are unhoused, how did they get here, and if they are from other communities, what does the appropriate level of engagement look like? Are there expectations of those communities that are availing themselves and their residents are availing themselves of the resources? So that's kind of in that intermediate section, which is within 45 days. And then there's a whole list of long-term goals, and chief among them, again, is really what is the role of municipal governments that surround the city of Wausau, but also of the county. What is the expectation? What should be the expectation of the county, if anything? As well as what supports are available from nonprofits and faith-based organizations, because a lot of the work in that area, in that space, is done by those entities. I hope that helps. It's not a task force to say, hey, the county's got to do X. It's really, what should the county, city, and other municipalities, how are we addressing this collectively?
Supervisor Lemmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I serve on the United Ways Housing Task Force, and I've been on that group for a couple of years. We've made some great gains through funding that the city of Wausau has committed through their ARPA dollars to open up the emergency shelter 365, 24/7. They've hired a community outreach specialist. Her name is Tracy Rieger. She does phenomenal work, and she actually has been called to go to other communities who are grappling with homelessness. So it's not a Wausau problem. It is definitely countywide. My question actually is either to the administrator or maybe Matt Boots, who helped write this. The deliverables that are on this charter are excellent. I think I love the fact that it's 100 days. I really appreciate the fact that there are some 30, 45, and 90-day deliverables. One of the things we've talked about at the task force is there's a group, they call it Community on Call. Sometimes our emergency shelter has more need than what we have space for. And so what the community has done is they've partnered with churches and other organizations who are willing to provide volunteers and a meal, but they don't always have a space. It's generally a church, and they have Wednesday night classes or Sunday classes. So if it's a cold snap and it's not safe for people to stay outside, there's a spot that's needed to have overflow. And without getting into too much more detail, I think this task force, if it's enacted, would be a beautiful space to talk about, are there any governmental buildings, whether they're county-owned or city-owned, I'm not sure, who could serve as that space to house about 15 or so individuals who don't fit in the regular shelter because there's not enough slots. Is that something that needs to be amended, or is there enough latitude with the group to be able to have that discussion without it being spelled out in this charter?
I can go into it a little bit. This is a working group. Like, I will not say that I wrote this because it's that guy right there. So thanks, but no thanks. Supervisor Arstead, myself, Supervisor Cavelli, Supervisor Lemmer, a lot of people have been involved in this. We've talked with Sheriff Billup. We've talked with Matt Barnes from the Wausau PD. It's not a Wausau problem. It's a Marathon County problem. We got to start taking more leadership roles and stop saying this is a Wausau problem, because it's not. We have Weston, we have Rib Mountain, we have all kinds of municipalities. It just sometimes falls to Wausau because they're dealing with the problem. So I agree with that 100%. And it is just looking at the problem. And it's not a problem that's going away. It's exponentially going up and up and up and up if you look at the statistics. So we have to work on this. So as far as that, Supervisor Lemmer, yeah, this document was made to say, okay, once this group gets going, we kind of want to see which way they go. Unless I'm incorrect in that. That's kind of when we were talking. We just kind of wanted to make that group be able to do what they could do with talking with people like the United Way and things like that. It's kind of a working group because we feel it's something that we do need to address. So,
In talking to Corp Council, I think the work group has enough latitude to make recommendations that be looked into. But again, it's recommendations back to the board as far as what the county's role is. So I think there's latitude enough for that discussion to take place by the task force. Supervisor Boots, anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I've spoken enough. I'm good.
Supervisor DeBrew.
I guess I personally believe it is a county issue as much as it is a city issue. And I think the county's got to take part in correcting it. My biggest concern is that they research it thoroughly, because some things are working and some aren't, and don't pay to just keep throwing money at it. That won't take care of it. I'm involved in a certain amount of nonprofits that are working. A lot of them have some sort of spiritual stuff with it, and that's the ones that are actually successful. I talked to the sheriff last week and had a good discussion with him, and it is a county problem, whether we like to admit it or not. We're all affected by it. And my biggest concern is that we find the correct way to handle it, so we're not just throwing money at it, like in some states where they give them the druggies more drugs. That don't help. We don't give an alcoholic more alcohol. So they got to go about. I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully this task force will find a way to do it correctly, based on things that are working.
Again, understand that the task force is charged with bringing back recommendations. The task force does not have the latitude to commit this county to any specific action or funding. Supervisor Zhang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While reading this, and I voted for it in the Health and Human Services Committee as well. I'm for it, but I just realized that we also left left one group out specifically. I was at the DeServis School Board, and we had a report back from homelessness students that are homeless as well. I'm kind of curious if there's any objections to us also adding in a school representative in there as well to have that discussion as well. Because although we're seeing that this is working to address visible homelessness, it doesn't address those students that are not visible as well too. So just throwing that thoughts and seeing what the discussion is as well.
Administrator Leonard, I'm not sure if we offer an amendment, if it would have to go back to the city council before they could, and they would have to approve the amendment before the task force would actually be formed. And then obviously if the charter is approved, there also has to be appointments. So we're by myself and the mayor. So I just question. I would ask the administrator if we would have to go back to the city of Wausau to get the charter amended if they've already approved it.
I think that's I'll let the deputy administrator at? No. But
excuse me.
I don't know if the city actually passed it yet, but the idea was, as Supervisor Boots referenced, this has kind of been an iterative process. I did meet with the city council president and the mayor a couple of times actually to go through and come up with the goals and objectives for this. I don't know, Cody probably knows if it passed yet. Yeah, I don't know when their next meeting is. You certainly could, if you wanted to amend it, to add it. I think you're absolutely right, and this is one of the things that Supervisor Lemmer referenced, serving on the United Ways Homelessness Task Force. That's something, how you define homelessness, there are a lot of definitions depending on what program you're talking about, and certainly if you're talking about homelessness within, as schools define them, individuals that are struggling with homelessness is a different definition than the one, for example, that's used by the Balance of State Consortium when they're selecting which individuals go to the top of the list. So certainly an important piece. But I think you could, if there was a motion to amend to add another group, we could do that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I've got Supervisor Lemmer, please.
At the last task force meeting I was at, the mayor was there, and he said that it doesn't have to go through the city council. He has the authority to formulate the task force on his own. So I don't believe it would not need to go back to the city.
I can just confirm that it was not put on the agenda.
Okay. Supervisor Radke, please.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I think it's a county problem. The county should be involved with this, and anything we can do to help lift people up, I think it affects the whole county, not just Wausau. Thanks.
Supervisor Arstead, please.
As Matt Boots said, I was at that meeting with Chad Billab and Matt Barnes, and I was so energized coming out of that meeting, knowing that there was something that was moving forward with Lance's start of a draft. He shared that with us. I think it's wonderful that the county would be working with the city of Wausau, with this task force, because you have two separate entities that can eventually throw money into it, and it's not just one, it's not just a county problem. It's there, these homeless people are taken to Wausau and they're dropped off, and it's really sad what these homeless people are going through. And I think it's very important that we move forward. I like the composition of the number of people that would represent the task force, because it's not just a county, but it's looking at everything from nonprofit, faith-based, mental health, people that are involved in the community. So I think it's a great idea.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say I don't believe this is a government that's going to solve this problem. I believe it's something like the churches and the private organizations that can solve this problem. Some of my support, these private organizations are already doing a lot of work keeping people off the streets, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Supervisor Zhang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make an amendment to add into the composition a representative from the local schools.
Give the clerk an opportunity to enter the motion to amend. Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Hart. Now, any discussion on the amendment to the charter to include a representative from the schools? Any discussion? Any discussion? Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in favor of this, but just to clarify, would it be which schools? Just like Wausau School District, would we have a representative from each school district, maybe? A school board member? I'm just curious what we're looking at here. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would love to see, what I would love to see is there being one from, one from the Wausau and the one from the county can choose one, whether it's I'm thinking rural and urban. That's what I was looking for specifically here. But I mean, I would be open to discussion, but that's what kind of the intention I was hoping for.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Boots?
I also would say let's be a little careful. I've always noticed that the bigger a task force gets, the less work that gets done. Small groups are better than big groups. So I just would caution that, I guess.
Any other discussion? Again, I think that Supervisor Corvelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the discussions that we had at the Health and Human Services meeting, and we've talked about this for several meetings, so this is nothing new, and it just didn't happen in one meeting. We talked about the task force, and I brought that same question up at our last meeting, and the thought process was that, like Supervisor Boots said, we keep it as a core group, and then we pull in experts from maybe the school district or other organizations into the task force for their opinions and their expertise. So you have the core group, and then you just bring in your subject matter experts, right, as needed. So thank you.
Supervisor Jacobson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that was actually going to be my thought when this was discussed. So you're not deciding which school should we pick it from. Do we need to pick from multiple schools? And then to Supervisor Boots' point, the task force just gets too big. I would suspect that as part of the task force's work, they can engage multiple school districts in the discussion to get their input without a school board member necessarily being a member of the task force. That's just my thought. But I totally agree you need to involve the school districts in this discussion for the reasons Supervisor Zhang identified. But perhaps we don't need to have a member just engage them in the discussion. It's just my thought.
Supervisor Zhang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm asking for clarification. Under the composition, it states government agencies responsible for behavioral health services, law enforcement, and housing. How are we determining law enforcement representatives? I guess I would also I would also hope that we would put the same criteria as to how we're choosing the school districts to be representative as well. And I want to clarify, I wouldn't want it to be a school board member. I would want it to be a specific school representative, staff that works within that school district.
Administrator Leonard, please.
Again, I'll defer to Mike, but when I drafted this, so please don't hold it against me. I did my best. My idea relative to process ultimately was, again, based on the composition, you see appointments from elected officials from the city council, elected officials from the county board. The rest, my thought on how this would work, Chair Gibbs would offer the amendments, or excuse me, offer the appointments relative to the county board members. The mayor would be, of course, responsible for the appointments of members from the city council. All the other ones, they'd have to sit down and agree who's going to be on that task force. Now, according to the city process, as I think was correctly stated, the mayor gets to just simply make appointments that don't have to be confirmed by the board. Your rules, well, this is not the normal looking task force and how it's created. The idea is that your board rules require confirmation of appointments, regardless of who makes them, whether I do or Chair Gibbs. So in terms of process on our side, that's my inclination, is that they would be joint appointments between the mayor and Chair Gibbs. They would discuss who from those specific categories, and then you would have the opportunity, at least as it relates to those appointments, to confirm them. I don't know, Mike.
Corp Counsel, if you had anything to add, please.
That is not inconsistent with the way this charter is drafted.
Perfect lawyer answer. Or deputy administrator, whichever one you want to, whichever title you're wearing. Any other discussion? Again, the discussion is on the amendment. The amendment is to add a school representative to the task force charter makeup. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is not carried. And we'll proceed back to the original motion, the consideration of the charter for the creation of a joint City of Wausau and Marathon County Homelessness Task Force, Resolution 39-24. Any further discussion? Okay, we will proceed to vote. Supervisor Robinson, thank you. And we'll proceed, and the motion is carried. And we'll move on to Health and Human Services Committee And Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee, accepting a donation to the Veterans Service Office for Veterans Emergency Assistance, Resolution 40-24. This is a budget amendment and does require a 2/3 majority. Motion by Supervisor Poole and seconded by Supervisor Conway. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to Infrastructure Committee, item H21, the 2024 Marathon County Culvert and Bridge Aid. We also have with us Deputy Director Kevin Lang from the Highway Department. If there's any questions, Resolution 41-24. Motion by Supervisor Langenhahn and second by Supervisor Voll. Any discussion? Supervisor Boots, please.
Did Kevin Lang disappear?
Kevin Lang.
No, I'm on the call just here if anybody has questions.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And we will move on to the Health and Human Services Committee, Public Safety Committee, and Extension, Education, and Economic Development Committee. Item number I-22, a resolution recommending the provision of funding for Judicare, the Women's Community, North Central Community Action Program, the Marathon County Historical Society, United Way 211, and McDevco in the 2025 annual budget, consistent with the level of funding provided in the preceding year's budget. Resolution 42-24. I've had a request by Supervisor Gisselman to abstain because of his affiliation with the Historical Society, and that has been granted. Motion by Supervisor Covelli and seconded by Supervisor Marash. Supervisor Sandulski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask for a separation of the question. Can I get a separate vote on the women's community?
It's a motion to divide. Is there a second on the motion to divide? And pull out separate motion on the women's community. Just a second, the clerk has to enter the motion. Again, all of these items, all of these nonprofit and fundings were taken to each of the appropriate standing committees and approved by those standing committees of jurisdiction. Okay, is there a second to the motion to divide? Second by Supervisor Ungerer. Is there any this is non-debatable. So again, the motion is to divide, and that would remove, or the request is to remove and have separate vote on the women's community funding only. And the rest of the resolution stays intact. Is that correct? Okay, is everybody clear on what we're voting on? Again, the motion is to divide, which would make effectively two separate motions to vote on. One for all of the nonprofits except for the women's community, and the women's community would be a separate vote. We'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is failed. We are back to the original motion to fund the nonprofits at last year's preceding budget item, line item, Resolution 42-24. Any further discussion? Supervisor Sandalski.
So I just wanted to clarify why I wanted to separate that. I maybe should have done that before. After getting this booklet we got from Public Safety, I was reading it through, and I find they have a lot of good stuff, but at the same time they have some things in there that they contradict. It's not helping the women, like the transgender stuff they support. That's not helping the women. If you watch any sports or anything, that's not a service to the women. So that's the reason why I wanted to separate that. But thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. And we're down to item I, announcements and/or requests. Any announcements and/or requests? Supervisor Kroll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am the only one silly enough to try to make an announcement after your Supervisor Jacobson's announcement. So again, your Supervisor, congrats on your new addition to your family. But I wanted to make a quick announcement that the southeast side of Wausau will be having their 3rd annual craft show on Saturday, October 5th. This is a craft show at the downtown airport from 10 o'clock to around 2. So if please anybody's available, we would love to have you at the craft show. It'll be all local crafters from the southeast side of Wausau. So thank you.
Thank you. I do have one announcement from the chair. Because the Housing Task Force has been created and it is a timely sensitive issue, what will be happening is I will be conferring with the mayor on the appointments. But I also am soliciting people of interest of the board that wish to serve on the Housing Task Force, and taking those requests into consideration. But I will note that we are going to, because this is a time-sensitive issue, we're probably going to call for a special meeting of the board the second half of next week, so it'll be after Tuesday. It will be a WebEx meeting or call in, one item on the agenda, and that will be to confirm the appointment recommendations that I bring forward so that the task force can start its work, because again, the timeline is time sensitive. And so keep apprised to your email, and I will give you, once I have had the opportunity to confer with the mayor, an opportunity to bring forward and schedule a date to have a one call-in meeting to get those confirmations approved. And again, anybody that has interest in serving on that committee, on that task force, please, by all means, send me an email and let me know your interest. and then I will take that into consideration moving forward and bringing those appointments to the board. Anything else? Any other announcements and or requests? The clerk did ask me to pass along, if you haven't done so in the recent past, relative past, please check your mailboxes in the clerk's office. Some of those mailboxes are getting rather full. So with that, we are down to the infamous agenda item that everyone was looking for, item J24. We have a motion by Supervisor Covelli and seconded by Supervisor Longenhan to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to know why mine keeps disconnecting, yeah. So I don't know. I know they were talking about a potential